Grazie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. I would like to express my gratitude to Milagro from the University of Seville, especially Milagro and Alejandro, for having invited us. And I also want to send greetings to all of our colleagues and friends who have been with us all throughout this project. The Italian experience is multidisciplinary. We have created a research group with different competencies, both from the legal and economic points of view. So we have, above all, looked at the ICT sector, the financial sector, and the insurance sector, with a specific interest on the public authorities, which in Italy are really important. And then the legal aspects. Therefore, the presentation of the results of this research work will follow this order. So we are going to start with Dr. Angela Paparella. She is the representing Exprivia, and I want to thank her because we have used her company as a case study to send our questionnaires and to go together theoretical and practical, and I want to thank her and her company for their availability. I want to thank Dr. Paparella first, give her the floor, and then straight away we will give the floor to our colleagues Luigi and Lucrezia. Then we will change the panel to start with the second block with the second speakers. So you have the floor.
I'm Angela Paparella, Head of Organization and Development Department in Exprivia. I will start my speech with a short video, about 2 minutes, about Exprivia company profile. Let's watch the video, please. Okay. First of all, I would thank University of Salento for the support about these interesting topics about smart working and about leadership model that change thanks to smart working. So Exprivia Group is a leading player. Can slide the okay. Okay, a leading group in about digital transformation with offering a system in digital transformation. We gained this competence in over 30 years of constant presence in the national international market. We have 2,400 people in 6 countries, and the slide after this we will see the countries. Team of experts in various areas of technology and digitalization, from artificial intelligence to cybersecurity, big data to cloud, from IoT to BPO, and so on. The group capabilities is enhanced by a strong partner network, proprietary solution, engineering, and customized consulting services. Since 2005, Exprivia was born after a merger acquisition, and so a merge between Abaco Software and AI Software. And now we have an international presence in Europe, America, and Asia. This is the path of the milestone of the merger acquisition from 1983 to 2021. From 2008, we are in Spain too. So these are the presence in international presence in Italy, Spain, Germany, China, Mexico, Brazil, Guatemala. Okay, this is the business process, quindi is based on competence, digital skills, digital enablers, digital infrastructure, and support processes across these different market, industry, energy, aerospace and defense, as you said in the video before, healthcare, public sector, telco, media, and finance. The international customer are in this slide. In Spain, we have a site in Madrid, and so we have a lot of customer in China, Germany, Bulgaria, France, Portugal, Brazil, and Mexico. Great player or player in particular of the specific country. So the focus of Exprivia is technological innovation, quindi engaged in research and development of new technologies and the application of innovative solutions to address business change in various industries. Focus on integration stands out of its ability to integrate different platform and technology. Customer-centric approach puts customer needs and challenge at the center of the activity, Exprivia activity, and a great commitment to sustainability, as demonstrated strong commitment to environmental and social sustainability through various initiatives and programs. As we have seen before, we operate in alliance ecosystem that lets Exprivia to reach important objective target in digital transformation. So to face digital transformation and pursue open innovation strategy, we have a strong alliance of partnership that we can see in the current slide. Research ecosystem is a combination of academies that are shown on the slide, industrial district, and organization. And then we have here 2 innovative startups of the group, Questit, active in artificial intelligence, and HR Coffee, specialized in people analytics. HR Coffee is very important for us for the next team. So after the start of a smart working program in Exprivia, we changed our integration model, taking inspiration from the human-centric design model. We heard about the human-centric design model in the previous relator. So human-centric design model is based on flexible work experience, intentional collaboration, quindi innovation by design, empathy-based management. We changed our leadership model and the performance by outcome. So it's the relationship between manager and collaborator is based not on monitoring but on outcome. And this is possible thanks to a bottom-up approach. To obtain this, we thanks to HR Coffee, we have implemented our human-centric model by a social community named, which is called Exprivia People, Social Community for Employee Interaction. Why our social community? Why? Is a vehicle for knowledge and collaboration, promote innovation and the circulation of ideas, is a vehicle for organizational change, and the leader becomes a leader and a builder of organizational microstructures and create a social identity that support our engagement, our process about engagement. An example of the result of this social platform is represented in this slide. Here is the knowledge graph generated by our Exprivia People, our social platform, corporate community. And we have two graphs. The first is represent the network that relates, the group that relates to other groups, both institutional and leisure of interest to employee. Groups strengthen relationship between colleagues because they are shared an interest, passion that goes beyond their work and generates great belonging and attachment to the company. To learn, to transform, and to share are three words about the social community, about the relation, the strictness of the relation among our persons. So in the second part, we have another graph. Clicking on one of this group, we can, thanks to people analytics, that is at the base of our social community, we can reach key people. We can know which person represents the key people that influence the group, because insert more content, because support other colleagues, and can post a lot of contents. In smart working, this experience, this social platform, is more important to have a collaboration platform with generative intelligence, people analytics, and generative AI that allows us to have current photographs of the organization. So remote working and work in office is indifferent because we have a platform that colleagues create a relationship among people, and so we can know what is the photograph of our organization in terms of groups, interest, relation, transformation, and sharing information and competence among our people. We are based on knowledge, so for Experia is more important to create strong relation among people. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Grazie Angela per questa illustrazione.
Thank you very much, Angela, for this illustration of this overview of Exprivia, the company we have worked with, for the questionnaire that is so important for this project. We are sending this questionnaire, and the analysis of the result was carried out with my colleagues Luigi, Viper, Maria, Lucrezia, and the Cosmos, and I would like to now give them the floor.
Buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon. My name is Lucrezia Maria de Cosmo, and I come from the University of Bari. I want to thank the University of Seville and Milagro specifically for having involved me in this really interesting project, Telechain. My role in this project is to collect information and contents on methodology and results that we will see later with Luigi. As we all know, most researchers and academia members use two criteria when defining remote working. Remote working and the ITCs they use. Very few people use the time threshold, so we don't normally take into account self-employed and occasional workers. So most research works, remote work is divided into three categories: home working, group working, including, for example, satellite offices, and also mobile or so-called nomadic teleworking. Smart working, what we call in Italy, meaning that you can work from wherever you want. In Italy, the percentage of workers that do remote work has increased undoubtedly. If we compare the figures with the previous period before the pandemic, although it's decreasing gradually compared to 2020-2021. Actually, most people who have studied the field show with their work that this growth is due to cultural reasons, organizational and social reasons, but also due to the financial characteristics of the company. Actually, the research that have been carried out help us to understand this. So remote working is only an innovation of the processes and a true restructuring of the interaction between employees and employers, whether they are private or public employers. Regarding most of the jobs and job definitions I have analyzed for telework, as it has been seen before, there is a huge deal of fragmentation. Therefore, the results we have found are not homogeneous. So we need to have a deep dive to understand what factors can hurdle the effectiveness of telework, especially after the pandemic. Our aim has therefore been to research the attitudes and perceptions of teleworkers and by studying the case study of Exprivia. Background. Well, I would like to say that the results are basically aligned with what we have seen in other countries. In the international literature, there has been an increase of productivity and performance. And this is generated by remote working, but it is also generated by the nature of the work and the investments that companies do in human resources. It is also due to the trust that workers have on the leaders. In the literature, we can see that telework leads to positive emotions linked to independence, control, perceived flexibility that has a positive impact on performance. In the literature, we see that there's been a reduction of conflicts between occupational life and personal life. Of course, this also depends on the individual differences, such as gender, number of children, and the number of hours of remote working, as well as also the health status. Additionally, there are other studies which actually show the opposite, meaning that there are more conflicts in work-life balance, especially for women, because of the social expectations and especially due to the stereotypes that distribute the tasks of the home per gender. In the literature, we have seen how this is the case. Impact on productivity also depends on psychosocial factors, and anxiety, stress, isolation can also occur. And these bad feelings can decrease the positive perception of teleworking. Therefore, based on the questions of the survey, our goal was to understand the perception of the Italian workers based on the study by Exprivia. I would like to give the floor now to Luigi. Thank you very much to all for having involved us in this project, which we hope will continue being really productive.
I'm going to be very quickly, just a few overview of the results obtained from this previous case data. The aim, as we were saying, was the analysis of the perception of workers in the case of this industry, which is telecommunications in Italy, and therefore the analysis of the results is a qualitative and quantitative analysis carried out in the different countries involved in the project. 132 questionnaires or surveys were collected. You can see that there's not a distribution which is even in terms of gender. In the majority of the people interviewed were male, but there's a distribution which is normal in terms of ages. We go directly to the main results as the characteristics have been discussed previously. The workers in this industry in Italy want teleworking for four reasons, basically. On the one hand, savings in terms of cost and time. Number two, flexibility in managing work activities. Number three, attainment of autonomy thanks to teleworking because of the flexibility I mentioned. And number four, the reduction of injuries related to work and absenteeism. That is to say, still, we need to define whether this can be defined as domestic or work-related injuries. But for the time being, it is a positive result in terms of the influence on productivity, but also on the reduction of conflicts between work and life balance. There's an increase of work-life balance, but there's also negative perceptions related especially to isolation, as other countries have also underlined, and therefore the consequent lack of communication between the different levels of the hierarchy. Also, the second disadvantage is that it is difficult to differentiate between work and leisure time, which might, in some cases, mean that people may become somehow workaholics. We researchers are used to that, and also an increase of the stress levels. We then tried to identify potential involvements or implications, rather, for the management of the company. For instance, you can see on this slide the following ones. We should prompt organizations to invest in new advanced digital tools for virtual communication and collaboration. This would reduce the deficiencies in communication between co-workers and also managers. In the case of this company, many workers evidenced the lack of parameters to measure productivity. They requested a system to measure the productivity of their daily work, and they called it control, so to say, between brackets, the control of the company on their work that should be based on trust, on involvement, and on the employee participation. Many workers also expressed a request, that is to say, that measures should be introduced in order to facilitate the digital disconnection. As for working hours, but also leisure time work hours. Teleworking, therefore, no doubt causes certain complex phenomena, and it involves disadvantages and advantages. Challenges can be overcome based especially on flexibility and on the ability of the person to adapt itself privately, but also institutionally. We think that the future research should be focused on the gender gaps, that we can see the practical implications on this project, and theoretical also, and we should analyze whether there's differences between the private and the public sector. And I'm closing here so that we have time for the rest of the colleagues. Thank you, Luigi. I'd like to thank Angela and Lucrezia also. And then we're going to leave the floor for Maria, Irene, Francesco, Manta, who is going to come, Francesco from the Salento University, Francesco from Bari, and Mónica McBriton from the Salento University, which is in Lecce. Bari University is in Bari, obviously. The two cities are part of the same region, and the relationships, the scientific relationship between the two universities of Apulia, this region, are very close. They have very close relationships. We're going to start with the presentation of Professor Maria Irene Prete. As Luigi Piper said, one of the most important aspects is understanding what is the impact of teleworking and the difference between teleworking impact between the public and the private sector. In Italy, as everybody knows, the public sector is very big, is very significant. Therefore, we thought that with Irene Prete, our colleague, we need to try and understand the impact of teleworking on the public sector.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank all the organizing committee here in Sevilla, and especially Milagro as coordinator of the project. So I will talk about a specific sector, as Attilio says, that is the Italian public sector. So the transformation, we can say, from teleworking to smart working. And I decided to consider this sector because in these last years, the Italian public sector, and I think also other public sectors in other countries, are interested by a process of digital transformation. So this could be considered as an aspect of digital transformation, so the use of new technologies for work. So we say that we know that what is teleworking, and in these last years we are talking about the transformation, the passage from teleworking to smart working. How can we define smart working? Smart working is not only the use of new technologies for work, but it is also, it can be considered also a new managerial philosophy based on returning flexibility, based on autonomy, of individuals in the choices of spaces, schedules, and also tools, and also increased accountability of the results obtained. So these differences are specifically based on a high level of flexibility, a high level of autonomy and responsibility in choosing work schedules, and also a high level of flexibility in choosing work location beyond the company environment. We know, for example, company hubs, co-working spaces, or libraries, for example. Another important difference is the greater accountability of results, because workers are not at home in the offices, so they need, in smart working also there is a greater accountability of results. So it implies not only the fact that workers work at home, but also a real organizational and cultural transformation within the company. The principal aim of this study is to understand the factors that can influence the use of remote work in the Italian public sector, and also investigating perception of workers, especially in the transition from teleworking to smart working. So the research question is, what are the perceptions of workers regarding these two way of working? I just we just have a look on the literature review, but we know that what is new, this the fact that this there is this innovative approach which has been termed new ways of working, which incorporates both temporal flexibility and spatial flexibility. So here the most important, the perspective is double. So we can, from one side, we have to consider organizational and business factors of decision-making process in companies and institutions. So the company or the public sector perspective, and on the other side, the psychological and sociological elements of employees and managers. So in this study, we focus on 46 categories of the Italian public sectors, and I use the casual sampling method. The sample was composed of 110 regularly employers in the Italian public sectors, with almost half and half, 48% of men, 51.8% of women, belonging to the following age groups. We can note that the majority of workers are in the age from 46 to 65. This is due to the fact that in Italy we can say that the majority of people working in public sector is in this class of age. So it's we can say mature workers, not young. So another theme is to renovate also human resources in the public sector. In the questionnaires, I used intentional satisfaction with the use of teleworking and smart working, with the organizational elements, social psychological elements, environmental factors on the basis of the literature. So the first analysis considered the number of days of the week for teleworkers, number of days of the week they work in telework or smart working, and we are between 2 and 3 days a week. Satisfaction is very high because we, in a scale from, in a Likert scale from 1 to 7, we have 5.6. Another result is the intention to use teleworking and smart working for those currently performing the work activities in person. So here the intention is about is 3.6 and satisfaction is 5.7. So we can, from 1 to 7, we are in the middle, we can say. Then I consider organizational elements as regards efficiency, improving efficiency, effectiveness, productivity, and also I consider the possible difficulties in separating work life and personal life. So these are the results. So we can say that we are in the middle, no? Between 1 and 7. We are 3, almost 3, 3.5, and almost 4. Then I consider all other organizational elements as regards people who work in teleworking in the future. So these are the results. I can say that I obtained a higher results as regards the possibility to use teleworking in the future. In particular, regarding efficiency, is about 4, effectiveness, productivity, level of autonomy, we are around 5, and greater level of responsibility, the opportunity to choose where to work, obviously, and also the effect on the productivity of coordination mechanism between colleagues based on virtual interaction, and also the effect on productivity of supervision mechanism between colleagues. Then I consider the adequacy of technologies, and in particular the presence of adequate internet connection, of ICT technologies, digital skills, and digital skills. Then I consider the possibility to have difficulties, for example, in setting meeting deadlines, resolving problems, in performing tasks remotely, a reduction in exposure to control and supervision, feedback from supervisors and boss, and also the contribution to a training activity aiming at enhancing the digital skills. Finally, the support from the organization, which is very high. Then I consider psychological factors, as also in other studies has been done, and in particular the impact on one's degree of loneliness, on levels of social interaction, on stress levels, concentration levels, also on the relationship between managers, among managers, with managers and colleagues. Then there is the fact of, we talked about before, many of you talked about the disconnection from work, no? The digital disconnection, and in particular the increase in the number of working hours, or the increased workload, and also on security and distinction between private and public life. Then environmental factors, and it helps to minimize the environmental footprint and also the contribution to reducing commuting to work. So, very shortly, I have time? No. No. Yes, conclusions, yes. Implication conclusion, we can say that smart workers perceive flexible works as more capable of ensuring high level of work performance in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, and productivity. There is a need to incentivize a gradual introduction of this tool. And also in the change management process, the choices of decision management are crucial to mitigate the risk of failure in order to preserve organizational performance. So, some critical issues, which are effective management of remote and smart working. They need to address challenges related also to cybersecurity, and also performance evaluation and activity coordination, and also psychological well-being of workers. So, considering this factor, we can say that we can have advantages on various perspectives at corporate, social, and individual levels, also in public sector, which is considered as a sector with a high level of resistance to change. So, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Irene. Private sector, public sector. Now we come back to the private field with Francesco Manta and its speech about the concern linked to the telework, specifically in the banking system.
Buongiorno a tutti, ringrazio Attilio per la presentazione e vorrei ringraziare tutti coloro che hanno preso parte a questo.
Good morning to everyone. I would like to thank all of the participants in this project that has allowed us to find wonderful people all over Europe at all the different steps of the project. I would like to... No, this is not my slides. These are not, it's a different presentation.
Ok, diamo la parola a Carla, magari tu se ce l'hai.
Ok, sì.
Change
Bene,
of
allora,
program.
If that is the case, then I will give the floor to Carla and she will start.
A little change of program, so we can find the slides of Francesco, and it's the moment of Professoressa Carla Spinelli and Mónica McBriton, and they teach labor law. So in our idea, the perspectives linked with the economic aspect of the teleworking must be integrated with the new challenges to the law that the teleworking, the smart working give to the work system, to the work system. Professoressa Carla Spinelli and Mónica McBriton.
I'm very happy to be here, and thanks to Milagro in particular for all the efforts she has done for organizing such an interesting conference. So, as Attilio told you, Mónica and I are labor lawyers, so the perspective from which we have afforded the topic of smart working is that of the legal one, and in particular, the role of the sources of law in terms of regulating the so-called teleworking or smart working. Because in Italy, we had regulation on telework, mainly performed in the form of home-based telework, starting from 1998 for the public sector and 2004 for the private sector, where it was enacted by an intersectoral collective agreement of social partners in our country. which implemented the framework agreement adopted by the EU social partners. So our perspective is to focus on which is the role, or which is the regulatory role played by law and collective bargaining, because it has changed during the time. And also it is necessary to put attention on the definitions, because, as I told you before, we spoke about telework in the first type of regulation, which was characterized by a strict level of regulation, which was very heavy for the employers. And so what happened during the pandemic, there was a widespread of using home-based teleworking, and this gives the possibility to better experiment the pros and cons of this kind of remote working. But before the pandemic, we had already had a shift in regulation regarding this topic, because a few collective agreements adopted at company level start to introduce a more level of flexibility in terms of space and time of performance work, in order to slightly escape from the existing regulation of telework in the terms of home-based telework. And these pioneer agreements regulated the possibility to perform work remotely, and they normally specified that they were not dealing with telework. So they tried to introduce a different kind of flexible work in terms of space and time regulation, trying to keep distance from the existing regulation of teleworking included in the law for the public sector and in intersectoral agreements for the private sector. So what happens then is that this kind of regulation appears to be much more an alternative type of occasionally performed telework, rather than as a means to introduce new ways of work. Our colleague spoke about smart working, which is characterized in the organizational literature by something more like the fact that the employee is much more responsible of his work. But indeed, what the company collective agreements regulated was much more occasionally performed telework. So the real difference was on the fact that the employee has to work in part at the employer's premises, and only in part outside that. In 2017, the legislator took the opportunity during the Renzi's government to establish a general framework. You know that collective agreements in Italy have not legally binding effects, are not erga omnes in their application. So the main aim of the legal regulation was to give the possibility to adopt this kind of flexibility in all kinds of companies, even if they were not applying collective agreements. And this legal regulation was overcome during the pandemic, because indeed it was established in a form through emergency legislation, and on the basis of the employer's unilateral power to impose, introduce, and adopt this kind of regulation. Regarding the main legal question arising from the regulation introduced by the legislator, there were three of them mainly important. The change in the notion of subordination, the kind of employment protection provided by the law, and mainly the relationship between individual autonomy and collective bargaining. And I would like to focus only on this last point, because in the law, the regulation of agile, what is called agile work, not remote, not telework, not smart work, but agile work, which explains the fact that this kind of regulation is mainly focused on the fact that we ask for major, wider flexibility in terms of time and space. And according to the law, there was no space for the collective bargaining to introduce other rules, because the main finding, the main regulation was devoted to individual negotiation. There is only an article in all the law, Article 20, which refers to collective agreements in order to determine the minimum pay and working conditions. So according to the legislator, the idea was to overcome the role of collective bargaining, devoting to individual autonomy, the tailorizing of the needs of the employers and the employee regarding this kind of flexibility. But what happens notwithstanding the idea of the legislator, because in Italy we have the Article 29 of the Constitution, which affirms the role, very important role of freedom of associations. So the trade unions were able to intervene in the topic, even if the legislator did not give them a specific role or room. And what was adopted is mainly the so-called double consent system, which means that at company level, collective agreements define general criteria on agile work, while the individual negotiation will tailor the employer-specific demands and the workers' personal needs. So there is an integrated role in regulatory effects between collective autonomy and individual autonomy. And this went on even after the adoption of the legislation, because thanks to the constitutional norm I recalled before. As a consequence of the pandemic, which has demonstrated that the role of social partners in regulating flexible tools regarding the work performance was very, very important, a protocol for the private sector was signed between the government and the social partners in December 2021 in order to define the guidelines for the further developments of agile work. And according to this protocol, the double double level of regulation was confirmed. So collective agreements were deferred a fundamental regulatory role with respect to the main critical issues concerning agile work that were emerged during the pandemic. So in the protocol, we find the regulation regarding trade union rights, the protection of personal data, and the workers' rights to information and training, which are not yet regulated within the law. But there are also remaining other topics very important regarding agile work that have been disregarded by the protocol and also by the collective agreement subsequently signed after that, which concern employers' powers, for example, or the termination of the Agile Work Pact. But the point on the content of the collective agreement signed at company level will be analyzed through some examples by my colleague, Mónica. Thank you.
Adesso come si fa per arrivare? Ok, allora mentre mi caricano le diapositive io ringrazio la Milagro.
Okay, so I will start by thanking Milagro, the University of Seville, for this meeting. And as my colleague Carla, I'm also very happy to be here because it's amazing to be able to exchange knowledge on this matter from a multidisciplinary perspective. Due to time constraints, I will be very short, so I want to talk about collective bargaining and analyzing the collective bargaining in a decentralized manner in remote working and remote working in Italy. As Carla said, formally the legislator has not paid a lot of attention to collective bargaining. But the Italian tradition and the capacity of the trade union organizations in Italy of always being present in work-related issues have allowed us to have a decentralized collective bargaining, even though there is still a long way to go. Additionally, it also depends on the development of decentralized negotiation in general. In Italy, there are lots of SMEs. And obviously, the trade union is not that present in the SMEs, and there is less decentralized bargaining, and therefore, it is less likely to act for the trade unions on matters such as remote working. However, a common denominator is, in Italy, obviously, the mixed model. hybrid model, some days of remote working and some days of in-person working. And the data analyzed shows that the important thing is to how to negotiate the time split in this modality. This has been heavily discussed in Italy because the pandemic lessons have allowed for this concept of remote working to allow workers to organize their time as they wish. But the problem is that in collective bargaining, this topic is not so clear. So it's out of the discourse because there are problems linked to the organization because, of course, the company is a group of people, even though the technological tools allow for independent individual work to happen, but the company needs to work as a group. So a lot of attention is being paid to the extent to which the employer can intervene to define or decide the working hours and the working slots during which workers have to work. Therefore, there is still a lot of work to do, and it will also be the same regarding the organization of work. So let me just share a couple of things on this matter. There is concern precisely based on this. There is a concern on the right for disconnection. Connective agreements are beginning to move along this line because there is a risk of permeability, having permeability between work and life, or work hours and spare time. It is rather symptomatic of the fact that the problem is still there, and it's time management. And the issue is that many collective agreements can't find a benchmark or a reference on how to measure extraordinary work and ordinary work. I mean, initially it was forbidden to talk about overtime, and there is still a door open in that sense regarding what's considered to be overtime. Additionally, the concept of reasonable agreement has been used to allow the worker to have a work-life balance better organized. In this sense, there are sort of quote-unquote simpler procedures or privileged procedures for any situation in which there is a conflict of having to look after someone at the worker's home. Time is going really fast. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time again. And by means of conclusion, I would like to say that yes, there is quite a wide space for collective bargaining and trade union activity, but as it was mentioned before, labor law dealt with it. And there is a problem in having organization of work and flexibility. And how can you influence the organization of work? Because Italian labor law, and probably in Spain as well, or in other countries in continental Europe, we have seen how labor law is built on a fine balance of safeguarding different factors, because work was initially considered to be in-person work. And of course, limits had to be found to avoid the company having excessive power on the workers. And now we need to review everything. Well, it is not easy, but that is why we are doing this type of activities. And I'll be quiet now. I'll stop now, because otherwise this is going to be like eating cherries. You eat one cherry and you want to eat more and more cherries. That's the danger. Thank you very much, Monica. And now I'll go back to English.
I try to be as fast as possible to conclude my speech. I will switch to Italian for just, I don't know, for multicultural perspectives, visto che è un progetto multilingue, multinazionale, a questo punto le lingue le parliamo tutte. E nel
So we are all speaking all languages. So as they prepare my slides, and I would like to apologize for the inconvenience earlier. So as Attilio said in his presentation, this last intervention is going to talk about the banking system, financial intermediaries, more specifically the banks. Because banks have been, the banking industry have been greatly affected by digitalization. We have seen that in the previous case studies, that the digital transformation of companies has affected in a positive way to many sectors. But the financial sector, we have seen that banks had a huge challenge posed by digitalization, with the arrival of FINT, the financial technical sector, and the needs of consumers are changing. FinTech is a new concept. So the summary of my presentation is this. From the point of view of digital transformation, these are the topics that had played a role in the banking industry. The banking industry is mostly focused in human resources, from middle management to top executives, experts, people with customer care. So let's have a look at the variables that played a role in this transformation. So there are a couple of studies that are quite interesting case studies. Even though the financial sector has not found an appropriate model for remote working, to the extent that most Italian banks, two national banks in Italy, have started completely contrasting pathways, and we will see the collateral effects of each pathway when it comes to digitalization in the banking system, especially regarding risk management and with the skills that are needed for digitalization. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about this introduction. So this is a little bit of academia, a bit of literature, because we've already heard much more authorized presentations on the changing context of digitalization and background, and the acceleration that has been brought about by the pandemic. But the digital transformation of the banking industry existed since 2015, when the directive on services of payment was translated to the European Union acquis, and it was also transposed to the Italian legislation. The digital evolution, or the digital transition of the banking industry, has obviously followed the evolution of the legislation. The creation of the fintech industry has defined the internal organization of the banks, and the new competencies, the new skills that are related to the STEM industries, which have to do with financial intermediaries. So this is the theoretical background in general for the banking industry. And for today's presentation, we are going to focus on the human capital or the intellectual capital, human resources from the bottom to the top. Clerks, all the way from clerks all the way to top management. And they have a role to play in the banking industry. And also we are going to talk about the digital approach vis-a-vis a changing customer profile with changing needs and with new skills being needed in the bank to look after these clients with a changing profile, potential clients. So I'll skip through this. This is just the regulation in Italy. I will only give you a very general idea because, well, so you can have an idea. Because Italy yesterday approved the new legislation on visas for digital nomads. So people who want to do remote work in Italy have a good piece of news. The public sector is still rather reluctant in Italy to these evolutions. And the private sector, however, has more room for maneuver. So in this sense, there is some sort of self-regulation, and banks got it right from the beginning, and we are going to see how the digital evolution has caused this new way of working, these new professional paradigms, which at the organization level have repercussions in different or at different levels of employment. So with the management of the digital transition in the corporate world, this transformation must be managed properly, engaging workers to avoid falling in the trap that we mentioned earlier, of the trap being laid by remote working, which sometimes have to do, these traps have to do with the organizational aesthetics of the companies. So for human resources, we need to have better training to use the digital tools better so that people can have a good command of the digital trainers and tools, and they could maximize and leverage their use in their tasks. And this obviously has to do with the level of specialization in banking skills, such as, for example, risk management is a great pillar of the banking industry, insofar as the bank, to a greater extent than manufacturing companies or non-financial companies, bank has to comply with really strict regulations. Banking, as you very well know, needs to put aside part of the equity and to create a fund for risk prevention. And one of these risks managed by the bank is operational management. And this could be, I mean, the human resource management could probably be not managed properly. So there are two different principles on how they organize remote work. There is one bank called Intesa San Paolo, and they wanted to create, or they had the power to digitalize all their departments, and they have become almost an invisible bank. And they have a digital bank in Italy, which actually they had in Italy some problems with the Market Guarantee Authority when they went full 100% digital. Clients of Banco San Paolo have migrated to this 100% digital bank. But Intesa San Paolo has designed this strategy of having short weeks and remote working, and employees work in person only Monday to Thursday, and during 120 days a year, workers can work without having to go to the office. To incentivize the digital migration of human resources, Intesa Sanpaolo Bank has launched a digital learning platform to improve the training of the human resources. Some investment banks have launched this branch of companies, which this is just basically a digital learning platform, and it's just like an academy with rather delicate or sensitive implications when it comes to training and education. There's another bank called UniCredit, which does it in a different way because they are following the national rules. Differently to Intesa Sanpaolo, UniCredit is sort of like has adopted an approach of wait and see when it comes to remote working. Every 2 or 3 months, UniCredit renews its protocols for their workers to be able to do homework, remote working. Despite of this periodical review, UniCredit, which has rented a beautiful tower building in the Milano downtown, UniCredit has left, abandoning half of the offices. They've moved out of 20 floors of their offices because I guess this means that UniCredit is along the same pathway as Intesa Sanpaolo did, with a massive digitalization of their operations and doing a digital migration of all the human resources, hence emptying these 20 floors of office. So a point in common that these two banks have is that both of them don't have any gender issues. So initially, UniCredit had foreseen the opportunity of only pregnant women doing remote work, but now, however, there is no gender difference at all. In any case, workers in a fragile or weak situation can always do remote work. The conclusions are that digitalization always had pros and cons, and that it is important to highlight a couple of points from the management and risk management point of view, because that's key. And it will affect the possibility of changing the paradigm of the banking industry, because the mistakes of management made by the management and on operational issues or lack of capacity of using IT tools can cause severe loss of properties and damage the assets of the company. So the bank needs to manage properly to avoid financial risks occurring, the so-called digitalization related damage, which have financial implications and financial losses. So the bank has to devote a greater fund to put up with these potential digitalization risks. I also wanted to talk about the fact that in-house academies are being created in these banks, where they teach all these skills that are needed for the digitalization. And I don't want to be pessimistic, but this is a huge burden, a huge task for a challenge for universities and professional schools, because they have the job of training the workforce for the future. And now we have seen how these teaching institutions don't see the problem, but I have to point it out, meaning, can the universities be up to scratch with what is going on inside the companies that they want to train their own resources? Well, this is another challenge posed by the current digitalization. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentations. I want to also thank Milagro, the interpreters as well, and I give the floor now to the colleagues, our colleagues from Poland.